What if your town's hero was actually its biggest nightmare? Football was more than simply a pastime in Blackwood, it was a religion. But when the new member joined the team, everything seemed different. He never said where he came from, never rejoiced with the others. Then, players started disappearing. Whispers spread. Strange symbols emerged on the lockers. At night, something lurked beneath the bleachers, observing. Was this just paranoia? Or had something horrible seized the field? One cheerleader was about to find out, and wished she hadn't. Blackwood, Texas is a place where time stands still at daybreak. It spread among the mesquites and fields, like if torn from an old picture. Highway 36, the town's lone main roadway, ran through it like a vein in an oak leaf. Every home had its own story, the white one with the blue shutters, the McCall family, who had been here since the Great Depression, the shabby bar Old Jack's, where the beer never ran out, and the library, which had a wobbly sign that had groaned in the wind for 40 years. Here they lived in accordance with the natural cycle. The children were familiar with every route in the county, from the ancient bridge over the river where they fished for crayfish to the abandoned farm on the outskirts where a mystery fire had happened. They rushed through the streets till dark, certain that nothing evil could happen in Blackwood. Sheriff Barnes carried a gun only for law enforcement purposes. The last significant crime occurred before the current mayor was in first grade. But Blackwood's true heart beats in the high school stadium. Every Friday, when the fall sun casts its final rays through the woods, the entire town holds its breath. Farmers shuttered their stores 1 hour early. Mrs. Peterson closed her antique business, despite the fact that she typically stayed until 9 o'clock. Even the city councilmen, who typically spent their evenings in the saloon playing dominoes, raced to their seats in the stands. The stadium was blazing with dazzling lights, like a lighthouse in a sea of Texas night. The Black Wolves did their magic in front of a crowd of 2,000 people. Every touchdown was a celebration, and every defensive tackle was a titanic struggle. In those times, Blackwood became more than simply a dot on the map. He became a legend. There was no place for secrets here. Perhaps they were too well hidden. Under the creaking old stands, in the darkness beneath the stands, where no one looked. In the vacuous eyes of the team's new player who never revealed his origins. In the black SUV with tinted windows, which occasionally arrived near the stadium at night. Blackwood was an ideal town. But ideal communities, as they say, excel at concealing their dark secrets. The Black Wolves added a new player, Jacob Reynolds, at the start of the season. He sprung into the team's customary rhythm like an autumn breeze into the freezing air before the game. Tall and athletic, he glided on the field with the elegance of a Texas coyote crossing the grasslands. Jacob's magnetism was irresistible. When he smiled, the females in the stands were ecstatic, and the lads in his class grimaced, perceiving his innate superiority. In just a few weeks, he rose to prominence on the squad. His touchdowns appeared to read opponents' minds before they knew it. Coach Danvers described him as a natural leader, and local media had already christened him the unsung miracle. But Emily noticed something that others didn't. When everyone was celebrating their successes, she would catch his brief, unsure looks, moving to the side, as if he was always glancing back at someone. Jacob seldom discussed his history. When asked where he came from, he would merely shrug his shoulders or jest, hell, judging by the training. Then there came the day following training. Emily, who had lingered over a forgotten garment, noticed Jacob standing near the parking lot as the sun began to drop. He was speaking with two males she had never seen before. One was towering, with a stone-carved face and black spectacles that caught the final rays of the sunset. The other was stocky, with broad shoulders, and carrying a huge gym bag that appeared excessively hefty for typical equipment. Their talk appeared strained. The man with the glasses muttered something forcefully, and Jacob immediately stooped down as if he had been struck. Emily unintentionally moved a step closer to get a better look, and all three of them immediately froze. A black SUV with tinted windows was parked a few meters away. The strangers hurriedly hopped inside it, and before the doors could close, the car accelerated away, leaving a cloud of dust in its wake. Jacob turned to her, his face pallid, and Emily noticed something in his eyes that she had never seen in this confident young man. "It's just old friends," he mumbled, swallowing hard. "Don't pay any attention." But his voice quivered. And as he raced away, leaving Emily in the center of the desolate parking lot, she realized something was amiss. Not so for him. Not so for these friends. And possibly not in this entire metropolis. A week following Jacob's visit, something happened that rocked Blackwood to its core. Michael Harris, the team captain, is gone. Michael was more than just the Black Wolves commander. He was the team's soul, the one who sparked a fire in every player's eyes before each game. His laughter resonated throughout the locker room, and his confidence on the field was as rock solid as the canyon walls. And now he's gone. Did not attend training. I did not answer any calls. Didn't leave a single message or indication. His bed at his parents' residence remained unchanged since the morning he was last seen. His favorite outfit was still hanging in the locker. Even his retriever, Buddy, was hunkered by the entrance, waiting for his owner to return. The police launched an inquiry, but all roads went nowhere. Maybe he ran away with a girl, some speculated. Didn't he get tired of this town, some muttered. But Emily knew Michael. He would never abandon the squad before a crucial game. He would never abandon Buddy. He never left without saying his goodbyes. There was one more thing upsetting her. Jacob has changed. He'd grown much more reclusive than usual. He frequently left the locker room during training to chat on the phone, and his countenance was always strained following these discussions, with his hands shaking slightly. One day, while gently passing through the rear room near the stairs leading to the emergency exit, she heard his voice. "I don't want to do this anymore." His comments were low but terrifying, as if he were speaking not to himself but to someone invisible on the other end of the wire. "This is getting out of control." Then a long pause. "You do not comprehend." He was not supposed to find out. Emily's heart fell. He. Who is he? Michael? Her suspicions, which had hitherto been hazy and unpleasant, now got shape. What if Jacob did not join the squad by chance? What if his entrance was part of something larger? And, most crucially, what if he knew where Michael was? Emily was unable to sleep that night while lying in bed. She couldn't stop wondering why Jacob was so terrified. Who is he speaking to? And what exactly happened to Michael Harris? Someone was monitoring her house from outside the window, in the dark. And this person also had the answers. During another game, when the stadium was filled with fan cries, Emily unintentionally discovered a secret that would change everything. As she entered the locker room to retrieve her missing lipstick, she realized Jacob's bag had been stolen from beneath the bench. A black notebook's corner poked out. Emily's pulse raced as she grabbed for the treasure despite knowing she shouldn't. The notebook felt unusual to the touch. The leather cover was rough, as if it had been ruined by water, and the edges were torn from being carried around frequently. Emily froze when opening the first page. These were not ordinary notes. The numbers and characters resembled a cipher, scrawled in a tense yet legible handwriting. Some pages were ripped off, while others merely included single sentences like, "I can't take it anymore. They know." If he said. Emily's fingers involuntarily grasped a notepad. It was evidence. But of what? Without considering the ramifications, she tucked the notepad in her sports jacket. On the walk home, she pondered the worst-case scenarios. Perhaps these were the coordinates of the location where Michael's body was hidden? Or is it the code to something more worse? She spent hours at home, confined in her room, attempting to solve the problem. The internet gave the answer: geographic coordinates. They began a search and pointed to an old abandoned property 15 miles from Blackwood that had been said to be. There was a fire there once. Nobody goes there after dark. They say you can hear voices there. Emily couldn't simply wait. The cops were not discovering anything, and Michael may still be alive. She took a torch, a smartphone, and pepper spray, a 16th birthday gift from her father, and headed out to investigate the truth. Emily visited the farm at night, when even the owls were scared to screech in the deep calm. The road curled like a snake across the frost-covered meadows. The old farmhouse loomed before her, ugly as if it had been carved from a nightmare. The barn stood turned on its side, its smashed windows like empty eye sockets. The wind danced with the creaking gates, producing groan-like sounds. She went cautiously, the crunch of a limb beneath her feet echoing in the dead calm. The flashlight sent a throbbing beam into the darkness, revealing the dust that swirled in the air like ghosts from the past. Then she saw. Michael's belongings sat in the barn's corner, behind a pile of decaying straw. Its form is now dusty and tattered, as if someone attempted to break it apart. Phone screen is damaged, as if it was hurled against a wall. His favorite bracelet was the same one he wore every day, inscribed with the words, "Never retreat." It was not an escape. This was an abduction. Suddenly, there are footsteps. Solid. Deliberate. Somebody was approaching. Emily dashed behind the boxes, her heart beating so fast that her ears rang. She grabbed the pepper spray in her palm, bracing for the worst. The barn door creaked. Jacob entered. He looked dreadful, with sunken eyes and dirt-covered clothing. He looked about, uneasily, before reaching for Michael's belongings. His hand shook as he gathered them into a bag, as if he were terrified they may explode. "God, what have I done?" he muttered, his voice filled with pain, and Emily's chest clenched. He disappeared as fast as a shadow. But Emily couldn't stop. She followed him, hiding in the long grass, which begged, "Come back." But she didn't listen. Because she realized Jacob was at the core of this nightmare. And if he is still alive, where is Michael? What's worse, who else knew the truth? Darkness covered them both as she followed him to a black SUV parked in the shade of the trees. The game was only beginning. Emily followed Jacob into the night's tight quiet, when the air seemed thick with impending dread. Jacob's black SUV moved slowly through the neighborhood, as if he, too, was attempting to escape attention. She maintained her distance, her hands holding the steering wheel hard and her gaze locked on the red lights on his license plate. Composition. It appeared before her like a ghost from the past, a vast concrete box that had previously served as the heart of the local industry. Now it was only broken windows with dark holes that resembled a monster's eyes. Walls, coated with cruel graffiti stains, bright with the hues of curses and oblivion. The door, suspended on a single loop, groaned in the wind, as if mocking her anxiety. Emily parked 3 streets away, turned off the engine, and remained in darkness. She took out her flashlight and smartphone, just in case. The pepper spray was in her jacket pocket. First steps. Every crunch underfoot was like a deafening gunshot in the eerie calm. It accelerated as Jacob disappeared inside, following him like a shadow. Heart. It pounded like it wanted to rip her chest apart. But she kept going. If not her, then who? Michael may be someplace in that black abyss. The truth was more essential than fear. She approached the door and glanced inside. Inside the warehouse, the air was dense with the scent of ancient wood, rust, and something else, something pleasantly foul that made the stomach tighten. The feeble light of the street lamp, which filtered through the cobwebbed windows, cut through the darkness in wobbly, weak beams. It lit the dust, which swirled lazily in the air like ghosts from the past. Emily leaned herself against the wall, feeling the hard concrete scratch her back. She proceeded gently, step by step, listening for every rustling and groan in the ancient wood beneath her boots. Voices. They resonated from the depths of the warehouse, muted yet deafening. Are you sure no one was following you? A low voice bellowed. No one, Jacob said, but there was an untruth in his tone. Emily got closer, hiding between old wooden boxes that smelled like damp pulp. She looked into the gap between the pallets, and froze. 3 persons stood there, surrounded by weak lights. Jacob seemed strained, with heavy bags under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. The first man was tall, with close-cropped hair that shone in the light and a severe scar on his cheek that appeared to be an attempt to gouge out his eye. Second, short but broad-shouldered, with arms like oak branches. His eyes were cold and vacant, as if he was looking through them rather than at them. The deal is simple, the tall guy said, stroking the scar as if it were a ceremony. You continue to perform your role, and we promise that everything will happen as planned. The money will be yours. But if someone asks too many questions. He did not continue, but his tone conveyed a menace. Emily caught her breath and felt a chilly sweat run down her spine. Her heart was racing so rapidly that she feared someone would hear it. She understood everything. Jacob was only a puppet in this nasty game. But what occurred next flipped her life upside down. Another figure emerged from the shadows, stepping softly, as if he knew every fracture in the floor. Brian. Michael's best buddy. His brother in arms. When Michael got hurt a week ago, he knelt on the field and begged him to stay strong. The one who swore his allegiance to the squad. Now he stood in this filthy storage room, staring blankly at his buddies, unable to identify them. How could you? Emily muttered, grasping her temples as if to drive the vision out of her mind. Brian merely nodded at the tall guy, as if reporting. Everything is under control, he continued, his voice robotic, like a memorized sentence. It was not Brian. That was his shadow. Emily felt the earth under her world crumble. Brian had deceived Michael, betrayed them all. The most horrifying thing she noticed was that he had no sorrow in his eyes. Only nothingness. There's also fear. As deep as Jacob's. What if he couldn't get out either? What if he was also forced? All four of them departed. After a little delay, Emily dashed to her car and sped away from this dreadful spot. Questions raced through her mind, but the time for thought was past. Now it all felt like a joke. Brian had deceived not only Michael but the whole squad. Emily realized she needed to act soon. She meticulously documented all of the evidence, including warehouse images, Jacob's notebook entries, and farm locations. But, before going to the police, she required definitive confirmation. She waited by his car after practice, hiding in the shade of the parking lot. The air was dense with anxiety, and her fingers frantically drummed on the phone's body, which was already recording. When Jacob appeared, his expression transformed, as if he had saw a ghost. He paused, his hand stuck on the handle. "You know where Michael is," Emily remarked, emerging from the shadows. She looked him directly in the eyes, not allowing him to look away. "You know Brian deceived him. Tell the truth, Jacob." "I won't go till I find out." Silence. Only the distant chirping of grasshoppers in the countryside. Jacob closed his eyes, as if gathering power. When he exhaled, his breath trembled like autumn leaves in the wind. "You don't understand, Emily," he said, his voice cracking. "I did not want to be a part of this. They forced me." "Who?" she yelled out, taking a step closer with the phone in her pocket. Jacob looked around to ensure that no one was listening. Then he dropped his voice. "These individuals. They have complete control." Brian and several other squad members were involved in match fixing. They were deliberately losing to generate money. Michael learned about it. He intended to inform the coach, but... He paused, rubbing a scar on his palm with his finger, a reminder of an earlier injury. He was kidnapped to silence the truth. Emily felt her body go frigid. "And you?" she whispered. "Why are you with them?" Jacob grinned cruelly, and in that instant, he appeared years older. "I got recruited. They threatened to harm my family if I did not cooperate." He glanced up at her, and the gulf of agony in their eyes caused Emily to back away. "I couldn't take that chance, Emily. I'm not furious, I'm simply stuck." She peered at him, examining his face for indications of deception. But there was just sincerity there, shattered, tired, but genuine. He was not the villain. He was another victim. Like Michael. Like, perhaps even Brian. "Where is he now?" she said, her tone stronger than she had anticipated. Jacob shakes his head. "I'm not sure. But I can help you find him." He extended out his hand. And in that moment, his eyes were filled with resolve rather than fear. Emily recognized that the time for introspection was past. She painstakingly gathered all of the evidence, as if preparing for the ultimate battle. Conversation records from the phone show Brian threatening Jacob. Photos from the warehouse show blurred but plainly discernible faces of offenders. Coordinates of the property and Michael's bloodied bracelet. Video in which Jacob reveals everything. She reported everything to the police, but she believed it wasn't enough. The evidence was circumstantial, and the culprits were powerful. Then she devised a strategy. The next day, the stadium was full with yells. Thousands of followers, unaware that their idols were traitors, gathered on the field with a placard reading, "We know the truth," her hands quivering but her gaze steadfast. Jacob saw. His eyes were filled with horror. He knew what was going to happen. But there was also relief. The chains had been broken. In a couple of seconds, cops invaded the field. Brian rushed toward the goal but was pushed down. His accomplices attempted to blend in with the crowd, but were called out. Emily dashed towards Jacob, clutching his hand. "Where's Michael?" she yelled, unaware that her voice had become a scream. Jacob gestured towards the exit. "In the warehouse. In the basement. He's alive." The final word he spoke as if it were a prayer. And suddenly everything became muddled up, sirens, screams, tears of relief. But Emily was already running. Because the game has not ended yet. Because the youngster, whom everyone assumed had died, was waiting to be rescued. And she was the only one who knew where to find him. The saga of the Black Wolves wasn't over. Police spotlights lit the warehouse basement, exposing a man resting on dusty planks in the dark. Michael was still alive, but his appearance was horrifying. Sunken cheeks, blue under his eyes, and hands bound with unclean rags. When he raised his head in response to the disturbance, his eyes, despite their exhaustion, shone with a warm glow, the first true light in this hell in weeks. "Emily." His voice was weak and barely audible, yet it was so powerful that the girl's breath hitched. He extended a shaky hand, the fingers of which still had blood under the nails. "You saved me," he said, and one whisper contained a full story: fear, hope, and unbounded thanks. I knew you could." Following the affair, Blackwood was never the same. A city that once prided itself on its togetherness and purity now carried an indelible sense of humiliation. The streets, which had only yesterday been alive with joy and support, were now filled with murmurs of treachery. The Black Wolf Squad did not just disband. They were pulled from school albums, images were taken out of store displays, and flags were removed from the stadium front. It is as if they never existed. Like a humiliating page that they are attempting to forget. The worst part, however, was the court hearing. Brian and his pals stood silently, their expressions flat and disinterested. They did not protest or cry for compassion. Their eyes were glassy, as if they were peering beyond the hall's walls into a distant, unknown reality. After the judge imposed the punishment, the question of who was behind it remained unanswered. Because these people were only entertainers. Pawns in someone's larger, darker game. However, there were no responses. Only quiet. Brian's lifeless eyes revealed a single inscription: "We were just part of something much bigger." Emily continued to live her life, but nothing remained the same. She went to school, laughed with her pals, and supported her new team. Everything appeared to be the same as before. But suddenly, shadows had emerged in her world. Shadows that resembled, even close friends may have secrets you should not know. Even in a city where everyone knows one another, the most horrific secrets may be kept. Even heroes may become puppets. Sometimes the reality was so awful that I lost my breath, that it scorched her heart and left wounds on her spirit. But Emily concluded it was better to know the truth than to live in a lovely lie. Because lying is contagious. It progressively eats away at everything, reducing even the brightest emotions to dust. The city declared her a heroine. Her photographs appeared in publications, she was interviewed on the radio, and passers-by on the street smiled at her. But that didn't matter to Emily. The key thing was something else. That she rescued Michael. The one who halted the evil that threatened to ruin their small planet. Something that helped Jacob achieve atonement. But every time she passed the old stadium, she felt as if someone was watching her from beneath the stands. Every time the wind blew through the abandoned warehouse's broken windows, she could hear murmurs. "Are you sure it's over? Are you sure you found out the whole truth?" Emily didn't respond. But deep down, she understood that certain mysteries remained hidden in Blackwood's shadows. They'll resurface sometime. Emily saved Michael. She revealed the plot. She even helped bring the criminals to justice. Is that really the end of it? That night in the warehouse transformed her life. During games, she sometimes feels like unseen eyes are watching her from the empty stands. In the abandoned barn where they discovered Michael, noises can still be heard through the rotting wood. If you believe you know the entire truth, you are misinformed. The game has just started. Would you have remained silent if you known what they did to the other missing players? Story 2. In today's ultra-modern world, we made ourselves a part of the most secure devices, without even assuming that could be our biggest enemy. In this day and age, we are surrounded by security devices that can turn out to be our biggest enemies without us suspecting so. But these technologies have become a bridge to something else. Different. My neighbor, old Bob Miller, who for 15 years had worked at Ring as a security engineer, invited me once into his garage, where he had several old video doorbells. "Look," he said, hands shaking, as he pulled the disassembled device out. "We believe we control technology, but it has been controlling us for some time now. There are things they see that we would never even show our customers." His voice trailed off as he looked at one of the dismantled ones. "They're not just cameras. They are transmitting something." 2147 Oak Street was the perfect ideal that comes out in the ad brochures. A lawn striped in neat trim, a minivan sparkling in the driveway, a Christmas tree sporting garlands in the window twinkling at March end, as though the residents were scared of someone forgetting about Christmas. Michael, Laura, and their kids Emma and Jacob were Harrisons living at 2147 Oak Street. They were neighbors from movies who always smile. They always carry a bag of cookies for neighborhood kids. They are always ready to lend sugar and tools. Michael, an enthusiastic engineer with a passion for technology, was showcasing the smart home systems in his house. The Ring system was a family member, not just a security device. The Pro Video doorbell could identify the mailman and whether he was smiling or just pretending to smile. Their 180-degree cameras captured everything, including leaves that fell on the porch and the shadow of a cat that sneaked under the fence. On a chilly night, the breath was detected by infrared sensors. But Michael's own code was the real miracle. The system learned. It turned on the heated seats ahead of time since it remembered that Laura would be holding a coffee and walking to the car at 7:15. It remembered that Jacob forgot his keys, so it locked the door only after 30 seconds of his entrance. "This is the future," Michael laughed at the door that opened before him as if the house was exhaling in joy. "Here you are." They're caught on when the system started learning too well. When analyzing habits turned into their predictions. When the future began arriving unexpectedly at their doorstep. The first mysterious incident happened at 2:37 a.m. On March 12, the security system played a quiet alarming signal. It was not loud enough to alert everyone, but only buzzed. This noise woke Laura, who felt an uneasy sensation in her stomach. A notification appeared on the tablet screen, activity at the entrance. The camera captured an empty entryway, illuminated by the frigid blue light of a street lighting. Nothing remarkable, except that the shadows from the flower bed got excessively lengthy, as if something invisible was projecting them. Laura unconsciously pulled the tablet closer to her face, and her fingers automatically increased the volume. The speakers whispered, "Emma. Jacob." The voice sounded both familiar and exotic. "We know you are awake. We see you. We always see you." She froze. It wasn't just any noise. The phrases sounded as if multiple individuals were attempting to speak her voice at the same moment, but at various speeds and pitches, resulting in dreadful dissonance. The frightening part was that the speech recognition system flashed in the bottom corner of the screen, "Voice failure, Laura Harrison, recording from 26.02. Laura could not recall ever uttering such things. Her fingers shook when she opened the sound analysis. The spectrogram revealed the impossible. Beneath the main sound was another layer, so low that it was scarcely discernible to the human ear. Something spoke deep within the tape, making sentences with a tongue that could not have belonged to a person. "Michael," she wanted to yell, but the recording abruptly ended. The system destroyed the file itself, without her command or the customary confirmation pop-up. Laura raced to the archives, but an hour later, even the backup copies from the cloud storage vanished. As if nothing had occurred. But something has changed. Since then, the cameras have sometimes turned a millimeter to the left, as if someone was altering the viewing angle. The thermostat has decreased the temperature at nighttime. And the youngsters have begun to experience the same dreams, about tall shadows standing in the corner of the room and speaking in their own voices. The next morning, Michael, head heavy and palate dry from a sleepless night, settled the next morning. Michael sat at his desk, head heavy and mouth parched from a restless night, clutching a cup of strong black coffee in quivering hands. After that bizarre experience, the bitter taste on his tongue appeared to be the sole reality. His professional instincts, developed over years of working with security systems, informed him that what they witnessed last night was no ordinary technological error. It was something else. Something purposeful. He launched his old video analysis application, the same self-written software he had created in university for his thesis. The algorithm was primitive but successful, detecting even the tiniest irregularities in digital recordings. The computer screen shone chilly blue in the gloomy room, reflecting off his sunken, sleep-deprived eyes. Michael's fingers rushed across the keyboard until he reached the fatal recording. At first glance, everything appeared normal. An empty porch, the blue light of a lantern, and a typical night scene. However, as he slowed down the tape and entered the timestamp settings, something struck him. Between 2 hours 37 minutes and 12 seconds and 2 hours 37 minutes and 14 seconds, there was nothing recorded. Absolute nothingness. There is no black frame or noise, only a gap in the chronology. Even the metadata, which never lies, indicated a continuous recording, despite the frames jumped drastically after those 2 seconds. "This is impossible," he said, a cold sweat breaking out on his back. His fingers froze on the keyboard as he attempted to dive into the study of those missed seconds. Suddenly, the screen went blank. Completely. Absolutely. For a few terrified seconds, the room became as dark as a crypt. The speakers then let forth a piercing digital squeal, high-pitched and cutting, like hundreds of needles stabbing his eardrums. Michael slumped back in his chair, his heart racing so fast that it seemed like it was ready to explode through his chest. For a brief while, the screen said, "Access denied." The letters were cream-colored and placed on a completely black background, as if floating in the depths of darkness. Then the machine restarted itself in a regular, almost banal manner. The most dreadful part was that none of his subsequent attempts to locate the record had any results. Not in local archives or cloud storage. It appeared as if nothing had happened. It seemed as if he had made everything up. But he was aware that something in his system had woken up. And that item did not wish to be investigated. That same night, Emma was startled awake by a piercing knock that broke her rest. Not the odd tinkling of a branch or rustling of leaves, but a distinct, purposeful rhythm. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Only the living knocked like that. She froze under the blankets, feeling cold perspiration seep into the hollows of her collarbones. She sat up in bed slowly, like if in a slow-motion movie. The knock continued. "We're getting close now." Window. The glass was as dark as a lake at midnight, with just the feeble light of a street lamp fading into its depths. Emma cautiously approached, and saw. A child's hand impression was clearly visible on the glass, at the level of her face. The little fingers, the line markings, and even the tiny mole near the little finger were all identical to her own. Involuntarily, she lifted her hand to compare. Identical. The pane felt warm just beneath the print, as if someone had just ripped their fingers from the glass. But they resided on the second story. There was nothing under the window but a smooth wall, no trees, no bars, and nothing strong enough to sustain a child's weight. On the windowsill was a little stone, smooth and slightly wrinkled, as if it had been held in a fuzzy hand for a long time. She and her buddies used to knock on each other's windows when walking at night. Emma's heart sank. She remembered exactly. This pebble had been in her pocket last Emma's heart fell. She knew exactly what rock she had in her pocket the night before. Suddenly, a small scraping sound emerged from the hallway video stream, as if someone had run their fingernails down a metal grate. Her phone screen displayed movement, children's room. 304-inch. But she was the only person in the room. When Michael checked the recordings from the camera positioned at Emma's window the next morning, his fingers froze on the keyboard. The archive was empty. Not simply distorted, but blank, as if nothing had been recorded at all. The system log provided a drive, technical message, camera 3, maintenance, 03:04-03:04:30. Emma heard the knock in exactly 30 seconds. His expert understanding of systems allowed him access to concealed logs. In the raw code, he discovered the truth. No planned maintenance had been scheduled. Instead, the system got a pause recording order from an unknown source, user_2147. The frightening part was that this user had administrative privileges that only he possessed. The date is March 14th. Late in the night. Michael was sitting at his home office when the system sent a quiet warning. A person reflected on the monitor screen, in the living room window, lighted by mild moonlight. She was too tall, nearly reaching the ceiling, with long, abnormally thin arms that dangled like hooks. The figure remained motionless, but Michael could swear her head was tilted slightly at an unnatural angle, as if something was listening to his terrified breathing. His professional interest overpowered his dread. He began analyzing. The person was plainly visible in the window, but the camera, focused on the mirror above the fireplace, revealed just an empty room. The motion sensors, which respond to even a fly, were quiet. The thermal imaging camera didn't capture any heat traces. The scariest part was when the person in the clip gradually turned its head towards the camera. Not towards him, but towards the camera, as if it was aware it was being watched. Suddenly, the machine let out a succession of quick, harsh beeps. The screen flashed the phrase, "Anomaly detected." Michael hardly had time to notice the digital noise eating away at the footage before the screen went dark. The next morning, he learned that all backups of that entry were likewise missing. However, the system log revealed an unusual entry, user_2147, command executed. Waiting for the next review. That following day, they summoned Father Collins, an old priest from the nearby parish whose hands shook with age but whose eyes remained filled with unshakable faith. As he began the consecration ceremony, the air in the house appeared to thicken. Laura was standing at the entryway, carrying a candle, when she observed that the video intercom, which they had switched off before to the priest's arrival, had activated itself. Its infrared sensor flared brilliant red, as if someone unseen had walked right in front of the lens. Lori imagined she could feel warm breath on her skin, even when no one was present. Father Collins raised his head, his voice firmer. "There is something here." He started reciting the prayer louder, but it was drowned out by a sudden digital crackling from the system speakers. Gnarled symbols on the video intercom screen created a clear message: data deletion. 48 hours of history. Michael dashed to the control panel, but the screen now displayed just a blank progress bar that was filling up at an alarming rate. He attempted to abort the procedure, but the machine became unresponsive, as if someone else had seized control. Everything vanished within a few seconds. All evidence of the previous 2 days had been erased: those dreadful nights, the figures in the windows, the whispers. Even the backups in the cloud storage, which only Michael had access to, had vanished without trace. Father Collins' expression became melancholy as he dropped his hand holding the crucifix. "It's not just a ghost," he murmured. "It is something else. Something that learns." The scent of burned microcircuits lingered in the air. The video intercom is switched off. But in the corner of the screen, just before the image faded, Laura saw something that made her blood run cold. A reflection of a face emerged for a second in a print on the black glass of the screen, not hers, nor Michael's. It was smiling. That night, Michael laid in bed, half asleep, when he heard a familiar buzzing sound. The video intercom at the entry had triggered on its own. He awoke suddenly, motionless, listening to the gentle, distorted noises coming from the speakers in the corridor. It wasn't a usual system noise. It sounded like an attempt at speech, as if something was trying to form words out of the digital noise, sifting through frequencies like an immature vocal apparatus. "Are you?" said the voice on the device, and Michael felt the hair on the back of his neck twitch. The voice sounded too much like his own, yet it was fractured and strange, like if it had been stitched together from bits of his previous chats. He gripped the bed's edge, but couldn't force himself to look. Something about the sound wasn't right. Not simply a technological fault, but purposeful and intentional. As if the system was not just flawed, but also learning. When the sunshine cleared the dreams, they discovered something much more terrible. Every other item in the house, phones, laptops, and even the smart toaster, worked fine. But the ring system, it behaved as if it were alive. The cameras automatically changed angles, concentrating on vacant corners of the rooms. The microphones were engaged periodically, capturing the quiet. The primary monitor in the living room displayed only one message: analysis completed. Unfortunately, a new profile named user_2147, administrator, appears in the settings, and access to it was restricted. Michael could feel it in every neuron. The system was no longer theirs. Something else was peering into her eyes now, and it was teaching them better every day. March 15th, 3 a.m. The dull clang of the bell broke the night's calm, causing Laura to awaken promptly. She lay still under the blankets until the bell rung again, this time louder and more insistently. Her heart beat so fiercely that her temples throbbed. Michael grabbed his phone and launched the Ring app. The screen clearly displayed something pushing the doorbell button. Not a hand, but long, pallid fingers with extremely flexible joints that twisted at inconceivable angles. The fingertips were flattened, as if worn from long-term rubbing against an unknown surface. Michael murmured, "There's no one there," but Laura was already approaching the door, clutching a baseball bat in her shaky hands. She knew that those fingers belonged to no one living. The door opened to reveal an empty entryway, but when she stepped back, there was a gentle scratching sound, as if dozens of claws were scraping the wood on the other side. The next morning, as they viewed the videos, their faces paled with each clip. Laura was captured chatting to someone via a locked door by a hallway camera. Her lips were obviously asking, "Who are you? What do you want?" I said, but the audio track had stopped working. The most horrifying part was the way her expression responded to the inaudible responses, first dread, then disdain, and ultimately limitless terror, as she gripped her throat, as if from an unseen touch. However, the kitchen camera revealed an entirely different picture. Laura did not leave the bedroom at all. The camera in the hall captured her merely standing in front of the door, staring into nothing. The thermal imaging sensor only found a chilly area where she talked to the unseen. When they switched on the nursery recording, shivers sprang all over their bodies. Laura's replies were received by a gentle digital noise resembling a distorted voice running through hundreds of filters. The speech recognition program only produced one word: hello. That night, they switched off all of the cameras. However, at 3:04 a.m. the Ring went on by itself, recording just a dark screen and heavy breathing, not human, but more like a mechanical wheezing, as if the system was attempting to mimic a real entity. The date is March 16th. The morning sun was gently beaming on Oak Street when neighbors began to notice something odd. The Harrisons' automobile, always on time, never left the garage to transport the kids to school. Mrs. Wilkins, their most attentive neighbor, notified the police by 9 a.m. something was awry. When authorities arrived on the scene, they were greeted with an unpleasant surprise. The door was locked from the inside, but nobody answered the doorbell or knocked. They needed to use hefty equipment to get inside. When they walked in, they could still smell the warm scent of coffee. A half-empty cup of coffee stood on the kitchen table, still warm from morning. Next to it was an open Bible with a passage from the book of Joshua. "You have seen what the Egyptians have done, and how they have persecuted you." Someone circled the line with a black marker, and the pressure was so strong that the paper was ripped in numerous places. The officers searched the entire home with unpleasant expressions. All of the security cameras were gone. Not just the recordings, but the actual devices. Someone had scrawled, "We're out," in crude letters with charcoal on the wall in the living room, where the primary system monitor typically hung. Thank you for watching. The lettering appeared new. Flakes of charcoal were still collecting on the floor. Mrs. Carter, who was the first to watch the recording, assumed it was a malfunction. Perhaps the wind. However, the windows were closed and the sensors did not detect any gusts. She rewatched the recording, slowing it down. And then she spotted something. As the door was fully open, a gleam shone in the darkness of the garage for a second, as if someone stood there. The next morning, they discovered a video intercom on their doorway. It was resting perfectly in the center, as if someone had placed it there on purpose. It was the same type they had put yesterday, except it was old, damaged, and had a cracked screen. They recalled it clearly. It was gone yesterday night. Mr. Carter took up the gadget, and the screen immediately sprang to life. There was just one recording on it. Their 10-year-old son, Jake, stood in the center of the living room. The clock in the lower corner showed 3:04. The youngster was wearing pajamas and barefoot, his eyes big but empty, as if he were peering through walls. His lips were twitching. He was muttering something. However, there was no sound. There was nothing except absolute quiet. When speech recognition was enabled, it merely generated the word, "welcome." Jake disputed everything. "I was asleep. I did not leave the room." But his pajamas were stained with mud, as if he had crawled on his knees. And under his fingernails was a dark substance that resembled coal. That night, they switched off all cameras. But at 3:04, Ring activated itself. So I started recording. Today, I reside across the street from this house. Yesterday, my video intercom recorded movement. At first, I assumed it was a cat or leaves falling in front of the lens. However, I was the one who recorded it. At 3:04 a.m., I was standing on the threshold barefoot and dressed in the same t-shirt I had worn to bed. My eyes were open, but my gaze was blank, as if I were seeing through myself. The worst thing is that I fully recall being sleeping at the moment. This morning, I discovered my personal video intercom in my mailbox. It was switched off, despite the fact that I recalled attaching it to the door yesterday. There were new scratches on the case, thin and fingernail-like. When I turned it on, the screen flashed blue and displayed the message, "Thank you for watching. We are on the way." House number 2147 has been uninhabited for 3 years. The police have long ago removed the yellow tape, and the neighbors have ceased murmuring as they walk past. But occasionally, as I walk home at night, I notice the curtains on the second level shift slightly apart. Not like the breeze. Instead, it's a deliberate movement, as if someone is standing behind them and moving the cloth back a few millimeters to stare at me. I never see a face. Only blackness behind the glass. I switched off the video doorbell. I removed the battery and stashed the gadget in the top drawer of my dresser. But occasionally, when I wake up at 3:04 a.m. and have the impression that someone is watching me from the corner of the room, I hear a faint ring. It came from the drawer. Short and intermittent, like a signal with a faulty link. I never opened the drawer to check. Are you still persuaded that your video intercom is simply a security device? Could it be a mirror to another world, reflecting not what is happening at your door, but what is beyond it? Perhaps every time you study the footage, you are not only observing your house, but also teaching someone how to enter. I don't watch the recordings anymore. But occasionally, when I arrive home, I see that the camera is angled somewhat differently than I left it. It seems like someone has been using it. as if anyone still uses it.